Hi, this is Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and this is Job Search Radio. You know, interviewing is not one of those skills that people are innately born knowing how to do. It's an acquired skill that requires practice. It's why I brought on Michelle Tillis-Lederman to speak with you this week and talk about how to prepare for an interview, some of the things that will come up in an interview, and how to be very effective. Now, I also want to mention that in the interview, there are a couple of early little blips that occurred in recording. So I apologize for that. No, we were not blipping out obscenity. It was just something in the recording process that caused that to occur. So, it's very quick. Just go past it. You'll understand the point that we're making at the time. And if you like this interview, please give it 5 stars in iTunes. It'll help other people discover the show. So hang in there, enjoy it, and let's sing along.
Are you looking for a new job or interested in leveling up? Job Search Radio is your go-to resource for insider tips on job hunting and growing your career. Here's your host, Jeff Altman.
My guest this week is Michelle Tillis-Lederman, the CEO of Executive Essentials, and named one of Forbes' top 25 networking experts. She's also the author of 3 books, including The 11 Laws of Likability, I love that title, and her latest, Nail the Interjob. Michelle, we finally connect. Welcome to Job Search Radio. Great to have you on.
Thank you. I'm glad that we figured out a way to make it work.
And that brings us to a story. Why don't you tell everyone what happened that is making us start off this way?
Well, technically, I am not savvy. So we tried the Blab, and the Blab didn't work. And then we tried the Google Hangouts, and the Google Hangouts didn't work. And so we are getting on the phone, and I love that you stayed so calm through all of that, because technology can rattle me for sure. And I think that is a really great lesson as we're thinking about, I was the candidate, I'm the interviewee, I'm going in for my job interview, so to speak, and it's not going my way. I can't get this to work, I can't get that to work, we might get lost on our way, we might break a heel or forgot our resumes, and what do? You can't not go to the interview. You can't start it over and press rewind. So you take that breath, you take that sip of iced tea that Jeff's drinking down south, you put a smile on your face, and you say, let's go from here.
Exactly right. Folks, not everything goes smoothly. I had an applicant who was meeting the head of a foreign bank on a final interview. He's in New York. He's walking down the street. One of the overhead terrorists makes a deposit on his shoulders. By that I mean a pigeon drops a load on him, and he's got this interview. Suffice it to say, he's got a stained suit, and he still goes through apologizing for his appearance and just feeling unflappable, and he's hired. So anything can happen, and it's your responsibility to carry your side of this. Do the best you can no matter what.
I always say that you can use these moments, just as we are right now. We can use the moments that aren't going in our way to build rapport and break the ice and put everybody else at ease. And I always think about the movie, The Pursuit of Happiness. I don't know if you saw that movie, but it was the same thing. He got out of jail, was in sneakers and painting clothes, and had to go on a job interview, but he wasn't going to miss that interview. And I think instead of apologizing for the deposit on his shoulder on his suit, you go in and say, well, I've heard this is good luck, so I must be primed for this job. Let's go.
As opposed to walking in defensively and feeling miserable and what have you. Yes, absolutely true. So the new book is Nail the Interview, Land the Job. Should we start with the nailing the interview or getting the job?
You know what? It's all part of the same cycle. And what the book does is really take you through what to do well before the interview and understanding when the interview really starts to well after the interview, and even after when you may or may not have gotten the job, the fact that the interview is still not really over.
You're absolutely right. So where do they start off with? You're saying it's not when you walk in the door, it precedes walking in the door. How should folks start off?
It absolutely does precede walking in the door. And as soon as you start your interest in an organization. As soon as you put that application, whether it's online or through a friend, your interview process has started because they are all of your materials are part of that process. Your cover letter, the person who introduced you, if you have a warm referral. But it's also the online presence, and you must be very aware that over 89% of companies are now using social media in their recruiting process. And companies have actually ended their candidacy with an applicant 69% of the time based upon what they found out online about them. So it's really critical to understand the things that are preceding you walking in that door and making sure enough of those messages are strong.
Is it purely based upon, stupid things that are said online, or as I mentioned on an insider tip, I know firms will do it based upon incongruence between what's on the resume and the profile. Do you know if there are other variables beyond those two that cause them to cancel candidacies?
Yes, there's actually a long list of things that will end a candidacy. So you want to be very aware of the language you're using online. Cursing has been one of the things that has ended it. The pictures that you're putting online, too many party pictures, the wrong professional image, watch your privacy settings. They had things about people bad-mouthing either organizations that they worked for or even not that they worked for. So it's that complaining and that attitude that is coming through on the social media is another major reason that people have ended the candidacy.
Gotcha. So we're starting off talking about their online presence as being important. What else should they be doing before the interview?
I love that because there is so much more. And I think people know the basics. They should go online to the organization. Maybe they Google the company. I would like you to take it a step further. I want you to figure out if you can get the names of the people that you'll be interviewing with. Oftentimes the recruiter or the HR head will give you, here's the 5 people you might be meeting with. I want you to link into them in advance. I want you to figure out who you have in common or what interests that you might have that are overlapping because that's going to help you in that rapport building section. I want you to think about, is there anybody else I know that has either worked in the industry, worked for the company now, or worked for the company in the past? See if you can do a coffee, an informational, a call. Just get a sense, get a feel. If you have those people in common, call up your friend and say, hey, tell me about him, any good stories. I have gone in interviews and had conversations around skiing, water and snow, animal rescue, and poetry, and walked out with an offer. So those things do help that rapport building section of the interview.
One thing I'll mention, folks, Michelle's saying go online, link in with them, but sometimes you have too small a network to really see who you're going to be meeting with. And that's a problem because you want to. There's a site that I put together. The address is li-usa.info. It does only one thing, and that is search public profiles of everyone on LinkedIn in the U.S. So if you're struggling because your connections don't work, again, try li-usa.info. You should be able to find them there. Sorry for the detour there, but I thought it would be helpful.
No, I love it. That's brilliant. I'm going to go check that out.
Thank you. So we've got them researching. We've got them doing informational conversations with people that may know the hiring manager, a few other things. Is there anything else that you encourage people to do before the interview?
So that is about a specific organization and company, but you also really want to spend time understanding you and what's important to you about the job. Why are you interested in this role? And really getting clear on the skills that you're bringing to the table. There's an exercise that I describe in the book called Your 3 Words. And we often get that opening question of, tell me about yourself. And we're thinking, well, what do you want to know? Well, if you really spend the time to think about what is it that you want people to know about you, especially related to this role, then it's very easy for you to go in and say, I am X, Y, and Z. And those characteristics that are critical to the role that you embody, that you believe, and you have those stories and those examples prepared in your mind to share. Not script, but share.
So if you were to give an example of how to do that, perhaps using yourself or someone you know as an example, how might you answer that tell me about yourself question?
So it would absolutely depend on the job. So I'll go back to my finance days. I'm a recovering CPA. I spent the first decade of my life in financial organizations.
My condolences.
And if I were to go on an interview, perhaps maybe as an auditor, which was my first ever role, let's think about what's important in the role of an auditor. Well, you have to be able to be very detail-oriented, organized. Maybe you have to get along with lots of different types of people, and maybe you need to have a really strong analytical side. So you want to think about, well, do I have those things? Which are the things in that laundry list of that job description? And the job description is a great place to start. What are they saying they want? Well, how does that match up with what do I think about myself? And so I could go in there and they say, well, tell me about yourself. And I could say, well, I can tell you the qualities that people say they see me the most are that I am probably anally organized, maybe as far as even meticulous. I am very analytical when I'm looking at things. I'm taking it from the big picture down into the details. But really the thing that I think most describes me is that I really enjoy meeting all different types of people, and that's one of the things that really lures me into the auditing profession is that you get to go to so many different organizations and interact with so many different types of companies as well as people.
And one of the fun things that folks can do is if you're responding to an ad, for example, and most of these are awful, institutionally created, dull templates that firms use time and time again. There's this section that normally people ignore where they talk about the personal qualities that they're looking for in someone. And I'm going past the one about team player, but I digress. But look at those characteristics that they're describing that they want someone to have. That's what Michelle's talking about here. All these personal attributes that can fit you well. As you answer that question, you can just state them to the employer, or the interviewer, I should say, and you've made your point in the first 30 seconds of the interview.
And I think you make a really good point about that personal and the personality. And one of the things as I was giving that example off the top of my head, because I haven't been in that field in ages, is that I tried to not just give you I am X, Y, and Z. I add a little personality. I showed who I am. I had energy around the things that I really cared about and elaborated slightly without speaking for too long. And so you want to find those little balances and nuances, because the truth is, even though we know we're supposed to be figuring out different aspects of our candidates, the one that really has the greatest amount of influence is, do I think I could work with this person on a daily basis? Do I like them?
So true. When a firm is hiring, they're trying to figure out skills, competence. Can they execute what we need them to do, and how are they going to fit? Mm-hmm. And, fit, I can go into a lengthy conversation about that. I'll simply say that's the likability quotient. And folks, you have to demonstrate some aspect of your personality and risk it all rather than be an interview clone. Because if you're just going to clone your way through the interview, just like everyone else behaves professionally, there's nothing that they can really connect with you about.
And there's one more thing I will add to the list of what they're looking for. It's not just can they do it, it's do they want to do it. And if you have a strong interest and a passion, you want that to come through, not just in the interview, but that cover letter. I tell you, I've hired people based on a cover letter because I could feel the passion through their words in that. And when you get 1,000 resumes, that is really the difference between do I get an interview or not. So make sure that desire to do the job and them understanding why you are passionate about this thing called auditing that really is not that interesting. Bring it out. And for me, I remember back in the day, I was like, I love the fact that it's a collegial environment and that we get to learn so many different companies and organizations and industries and work with different people. And I really was excited about it until I learned about what I was really doing.
Which is why you do what you do today, but that's a different conversation. So we've gotten everyone through tell me about yourself. And how do people proceed from there? What's going to help them land this job?
So what you want to realize is that there's about 5 different phases of the interview, and it's not linear phases. You have the rapport building that we've talked a little bit about. You have that opening question, which we've also talked a little bit about. And then the core of the interview, which are trying to determine those 3 things that we've been saying. Do they want to, can they, and do they fit? And then you have the section where you get to ask them questions. And this, to me, is something that should be infused throughout the entire interview because it enables it to be conversational rather than an interrogation feel. You will be more comfortable if you start posing questions earlier and not wait to the "do you have any questions for me" phase. The questions that you ask are giving an indication to the interviewer of what's important to you and how are you making your decision. And the last phase of the interview that you do need to think about is the close, and how do we end it understanding what the next steps are.
So when you talk about asking questions about what's interesting to you, you're not saying, "So tell me about the job," or "Is that how it's done here?" You're asking more specific things. Again, could you offer an example?
Absolutely. When you think about how am I going to decide, do I want this job? What are the things that are important to me? Those are really where your questions are going to drive from. I remember back early on in my career, I was very concerned with the culture and the people. And I often asked the question of, do you view that you work with coworkers or do you view that you work with friends? And it was for me to get a sense of what was the camaraderie like. And it was important to me. And I will tell you, I took a lower paying job based on how I felt about those answers in two different companies. I often do ask questions that are going to give me insight into assuming I'm going to get the job. So I might say, can you tell me a little bit about the team I'll be working with or the manager? What do you think would enable somebody to be successful in the role? Or what is one mistake that you've seen other people make that you wish everybody knew coming in? And so really things that are going to help me jump off strongly. I might ask things around where they see themselves in 5 to 10 years, because that's going to give me an indication of career trajectory within an organization.
You posed a question I've never heard before. I'm going to ask you to repeat it. And that's the one, what would you want someone to know coming in to help them avoid mistakes? Do you remember the language that you used?
I don't know about the exact language, but yes, it's something to say, what is a mistake that you've seen past employees make that you wish everybody knew coming on the job?
That is fabulous.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I've created 1,500 plus videos about job hunting and hiring, and that's the first time I've heard that, and it is an excellent question. It really is.
For me, I put a whole list of different types of categories of questions and types of questions to get your mind thinking. Because what happens is they hear the same questions over and over again. But when you ask questions that really are going to give you information that are going to help you make a decision, then it's not just, I need to ask 3 questions because it's that section of the interview. And so I really believe strongly in only asking questions you actually care about the answer to, and not the, how do you feel about the culture? I'll ask things like, tell me about your favorite part of working here, and tell me about your least favorite part of working here, because I want to come into a job with my eyes wide open.
I normally will tell someone to ask about what the expectations are over the first 30, 60, 90 days. And then the second follow-up question to that is, let's say I'm hired, I'm on board for a year, and it's time to give me a review. I haven't just done a good job, I've done a spectacular one. What would I have accomplished during that year that would cause you to think that way?
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I have one that was similar. I used to say, tell me what success looks like in this role. What does hitting it out of the ballpark look like? So very, very similar concept.
Cool. So here's the part that no one ever talks about. And it's so critical, folks, and to talk with us about it. So let's talk about how someone's going to end the interview properly.
So it's tough because, it's awkward on both sides of the desk. That person's like, well, do you have any more questions? And you're thinking, I should ask more questions. So there's some ways that you can give the interviewer an indicator, and it's almost like letting them off the hook. If you've asked questions throughout, you want to save 1 or 2 or 3 towards that end section because it helps wrap the interview, but you don't have to have a half a dozen at the end. You might say, well, I do have one more question. Or my last question for you is, and so it's giving them that indication not to throw that question back out to you. One of my favorite ways to end an interview, and this is risky, and I have a lot of people who've told me I would never want to do that, but I love doing this, and I'll tell you why. I will sometimes say, no, I don't have any more questions. But what I do want to know is there anything that you think is important in this role that I haven't covered or explained fully to you? Is there any something like that? Or I might ask, do you have any concerns with me being able to do this job to its fullest? And really what I'm asking is, do you see any weaknesses in me? And is there anything that you really need to know that you don't know yet? And the reason I ask those types of questions is because they think it or they feel it regardless of whether I asked it. But if I ask it in the interview, I have the opportunity to recover, to fix, to clarify. And so I would rather know than not know.
And what this also does is to rectify, not all interviewers are particularly good. And the result winds up being they may make assumptions about your background without having investigated it. So I've had situations where people have asked that question at the end of an interview. They've never been asked about something. It's broached in the subject. It's like, oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. And then they start going into it, turn the tables, and lo and behold, an offer comes. Doesn't happen all the time because sometimes the bias is so closely held, but at least gives you the chance to compete.
And sometimes I'll end the interview with, when they say, do you have any more questions, I'll say, no, I don't have any more questions, but I just want to make sure that I have been very clear on, and I'll say something that I want to reemphasize on why I want the job or what I think I bring to the table or some type of closing statement that projects the characteristics or the attributes that I want to make sure that they know about me.
It's like being the attorny who's presenting closing arguments.
Exactly. Yes.
You're standing in front of the jury making a case.
And, what you were talking about before, it almost reminds me of like the halo and the horns effect. Some of that closing opportunity is to ensure that the horns or halos didn't blur the entire interview. And for the audience that might not be familiar with those phrases, is that when we draw a conclusion about somebody, we look to then prove our conclusion, and that conclusion happens very early. And so if you mess up a little at the beginning, you might not get that opportunity to recover. So you want to make sure that you're presenting contrary information so that they see the full picture of you.
Sweet, although most people are tempted to keep with the halos because they like the halo effect, and they're looking for, they're happy that the employer has this projection about them that they're this way because it advantages them. But certainly the horns you want to be dealing with pretty quickly.
Well, I will tell you, I've had halos effect that, and I agree with you. Most of the time, ride that halo all the way to the job offer. But I rode that halo 7 rounds into interviews and didn't get the job offer. And because there was something always in the surface that they're like, she's great, she's great, she's great. They kept riding that halo, but they weren't digging in one aspect that, I've wasted 7 rounds of interviews for them to tell me I was too casual. I mean, really, that was the only feedback. I had every qualification, every skill set, but my style, whether it's the way I sat, the way I spoke, smiling too much, it was those types of aspects were the reason I didn't get the job. And had they not ridden the halo the whole way, we would have uncovered that a lot sooner.
I'm not sure it was that, because sometimes people want to give excuses and they can't quite put their finger on it, so they come up with a trivial point. I'll simply say whatever it was, whether it was that or something that they didn't want to reveal. 7 interviews is a long time to be dating someone to find out that at the end of the day they're not into you. So
yeah, just not that into you.
So we're starting to come up on the end of time with one another, and this has been flowing so nicely. But I want to make sure that if there are points that you want to make to coach people about interviewing, we get a chance to address them here. So what haven't I asked you about, or what haven't we covered that we really should cover to help people land the job or proceed to nail the interview?
There's one thing that I always like to talk about is that the interview isn't over even though you didn't get the job. And I know that seems really backwards, but the truth is you have established a relationship with an organization or with some individuals along the way, and you want to maintain and extend that even after not getting the job, because it could be that that job wasn't the right fit, but they love you and they might think of you for the next thing. And I've seen that happen numerous times. Or it could be that, you know what, they've left that company, they went somewhere else, they remembered you, and they're hiring over there, and you'd be a fit perfectly over there. So really do think about the relationships that you're building as not one and done, but an extension of the network. Continue to build that network, because 90% of executive level jobs come from networking. Over 50% of all levels come from networking, so don't let those relationships go.
As folks have heard me say many times, 70% are filled by networking, and 70% of the 70% come from introductions to people that you didn't know at the beginning of the search. So always build your network, maintain the relationships. You've invested time with them, they've invested time with you. Why would you want to drop the relationship just because they said no that time? Great interview, Michelle. Thank you so much. How can folks find out about you, your books, everything?
All the good stuff. I am easy to find online. My full name, Michelle, M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E, Tillis, T-I-L-L-I-S, Lederman, Lederman.com is my website. On there, I give away lots of goodies. You can get a chapter of the 11 Laws of Likability. You can take a networking assessment. You can get a free interview preparation checklist. Actually, if people want to go to MichelleTillis-Lederman /gift pack, you can get all of them. And you can check out my blog, and you can check out my YouTube channel, and you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Twitter at MTLederman. But if you go on Facebook, you got to promise me, go to my professional page and click the like button, because I keep the 80s hair to myself on my personal page.
Hey, Michelle, thank you so much for making time today. And, folks, we'll be back next time with someone else who will help the heck out of you in terms of making this job search more successful. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and visit me at my website, thebiggamehunter.us. There's a lot there as well that you can watch, listen to, or read to help you find work. And if we aren't connected on LinkedIn, send a connection request at linkedin.com/IN/thebiggamehunter. Lastly, special only for my listeners, I'm discounting my coaching services. You'll find out about that on my website. Just look for, actually, I'll have a link in the show notes. So click the link in the show notes, whether you're listening on the web or on your phone. Have me coach you. It'll make the job search that much easier. Hope you have a great day. Hope you come back next week. Take care.
For more job search advice, visit Jeff's website at thebiggamehunter.us. That's thebiggamehunter.us.